What's going on, guys? Bel Air here as we start to slowly prepare for the impending World Championship of this season. I wanted to start, going through the process of beginning to break down some of the better players that we're going to be seeing at the event, talking through some of their recent history to get to this point, what the season has entailed, some of the stats, and a little bit of the storyline for these players heading in. And where better to start but with Rise. Karmine Corp overall are one of the most perplexing teams going into the World Championship. And Rise in particular, I think, is a catalyst for what this team is and what it could be. We are starting off with a pretty big game from this season. This is Game 7 against Team Falcons from Major 1. Karmine Corp, as you may well know, did not even make the second LAN event in London from this season, but they did very well in Copenhagen. And before we talk a little bit more about that, let's actually take a step back as Rise is going to absolutely rip a nasty shot here to start off the scoring. Going to turn quickly, get the first touch, and just put that one away with ease over this Team Falcons defense. So let me take you guys on a little trip down memory lane, if you'll indulge me here, as 2 on the board here for Karmine Corp. Let's go back to 21-22 RLCS season. This Team Queso roster kind of pops up out of nowhere. We really don't see them at all outside of some close qualifiers. Back then we had fall, winter, and spring, as you may remember. So, in the fall they're pretty silent, but out of nowhere in this winter split, this Team Queso, this Rise Joyo Vatira team, make a huge splash in winter. They're the #1 seed heading into that winter major, and they end up finishing second. Very impressive start. Was it a flash in the pan, or is this team of, young guns going to do it again? Well, they end up making it back to the spring major after an incredibly impressive spring split. They end up winning the whole thing. And it's like, oh my goodness, like, we have never seen anything like this before. This young trio have completely splashed onto the scene and taken what many consider the strongest region in the world by storm. In that spring major, Rise is top 10 in goals and shots. He's top 15 in rating. The only player who's doing it better is Vatira, who is going to get a crazy dunk for an almost goal there that the Falcons are going to try and turn into a transition attempt. They lose in devastating fashion in one of the best series of all time, in my opinion, in the World Championship. They're in the quarterfinals against Ferra, and that was Card, Kaio, and Yan at the time. And if you were a fan at the time, there's no way you don't remember the series that I'm talking about. It's essentially a 0-second goal. In the waning seconds, Yan gets a ridiculous double touch to put things away and have them end up beating the favorites of that World Championship in what was then a Moist Esports team after they got picked up by Moist after previously being Team Queso. So the next season, 22-23, that World Championship really took a toll on the roster. Vatira leaves, and instead they slot in Astral, who at the time was still considered one of the premier strikers in the world, certainly in the European region. Things go good, not great. They barely make the major. They somehow get second at the fall major against Gen G, 2 teams that nobody thought would be there. Moist, the lowest seed from Europe, end up making it second. Maybe it's just big moment Rise and Vatira. Doesn't matter what they do online. Once you get them on the LAN stage, they're unstoppable. And they lose to a pretty shocking Gen G team as well, who people had spent the entire offseason since that team formed, and even in the tournament doubting them. They end up winning a huge victory for apparently Jack's career, for Chronic's career, Nali as well, of course. After that loss, Rise opts out. He briefly, we'll say flirts, but it was more than that. It was seemingly a done deal, as the whispers around the community went, that he was going to move over to North America and join version 1, which was going to be a crazy roster. I was already, hypothesizing about them being the best team in the world, and we saw Com essentially getting ready to move off of the roster, saying his goodbyes. It even trickled down into Magic Bear potential moves, and it was all a pump fake. Rise at the 11th hour says, you know what, I'm actually going to stay in Europe. I'm going to join Archie and Joris on Oxygen Esports, and this is the team. Archie, his English brethren, Joris, an incredible talent in the European region, at kind of the end of the peak of his career there. We didn't know that quite yet, but that roster looks super dangerous, super potent. We thought they would be an incredible team. And they made it to 3 straight semifinals in that winter split, so his first split with Oxygen, as a Rise. Huge goal here in the waning seconds of this Game 7. 3 straight semis. They lose in tough fashion in all of those, and once they get to the winter major, they barely lose to Complexity. Game 5, really close. Big win against Gen G in groups, and they end up drawing Vitality, the pre-Zen Vitality, it's important to point out, against, they end up getting eliminated by Vitality in the first round of the playoffs there. As in this huge Game 7, Rise, 2 goals, 2 assists, is a part of all of the scoring to lift this incredibly star-studded Karmine Corp team over what we now consider going into the World Championships, one of, if not the favorite team to win things all of it in Team Falcons. So let's pause there after Rise suffers a pretty challenging defeat with his brand new Oxygen teammates, and we'll pick up this legacy with the spring split from last season. All right, semifinals against Gentlemates. This is the next series after the one we just watched against Team Falcons from the Copenhagen Major. Gentlemates are up 2-0 already in this series. They need a huge win here, going down 3-0. Essentially, statistically eliminates you from coming back. There have been very few chances in which we have even gone to a Game 7 after going down 3-0 at a LAN, nonetheless. So this is a absolute must-win game here from Karmine Corp, and Rise is going to show up huge. So when we left off, Oxygen had just got eliminated by Vitality from the winter major of last season, and Rise opts to change again. He had already made that move off of Moist and joined Oxygen, and he just didn't feel like he could contend on that Oxygen roster, I suppose. Still, a little bit of he said, she said on what ultimately made him decide to do that, but no matter what the reason, he ends up moving to BDS. He wants to be on a roster that he can win. He seemingly speaks French. I don't know if it's fully conversationally, but at least enough to calm and participate with his new French Wonder teammates in Seiko and Monkey Moon, who had a very, very rocky season of their own after winning the World Championship the year before. But no matter the case, they end up picking up Rise to complete their team that they're going to try and win a World Championship with. And with Monkey Moon and Seiko, they lose in the grand finals to Vitality, who now have Zen in the Spring Major and Worlds. Even though they were incredibly dangerous on online games, they just could not overcome the juggernaut that Team Vitality was. It's hard to say, where they would have stacked up if we wouldn't have had just an absolutely scorching hot Vitality at the time. But for all intents and purposes, especially as it appears in the rankings and as I recall it, that BDS team were incredibly good, and they just could not overcome their kryptonite, and nobody could overcome the proverbial kryptonite that was that Team Vitality roster. But no matter what, Rise once again looks for greener pastures after the season. It's hard to say no when Vatira is looking to kind of piecemeal a super team of his own, and he gives you the ring. They were so good together in the Team Queso and Moist days back in the day that it seemed like, a very obvious pairing to make once again, and picking up Atow, who was becoming, one of the preeminent strikers in the RLCS at such a young age. It just seemed like a no-brainer. I, for what it's worth, had all 3 of those players top 5 at the end of last season. So obviously it was no surprise that this season, in Major 1, going into Copenhagen, they won all 3 open qualifiers, and they beat everybody along the way. They beat Gentlemates in an open qualifier grand finals. They did the same against BDS and the same against Vitality. This Karmine Corp team was the real deal. Now let's fast forward to that Copenhagen major. They look great in Swiss, making their way all the way to the semifinals. They had beaten Complexity. They beat Gen G. They beat Falcons, which was a crazy win. Obviously, they were contending and one of the best teams here. We had seen it over the entire online portion of the Major 1. And then they end up falling short to Gentlemates in that semifinal, who ended up winning the entire event. You can only be so upset if you lose a close one to the eventual champions. But of course they're going to be back next split, right? Major 2 is theirs. You know, this is the same thing that we saw from Karmine Corp last season, where, you know, they lost the first one and then they ended up, you know, scorching back to get one on the board with that exotic Itachi roster. But that is as opposite from the case as we could possibly get. They end up losing in a quarterfinals in Open Qualifier 1 or Qualifier 4, depending on how you want to look at it, from the Major 2. They lose to Oxygen. Fine loss. They got to come back. And then the universe falls apart as Karmine Corp do not even qualify for the main event for the second Open Qualifier from the Major 2 split. They lose to Sa and someone else. Pardon me for whomever else were able to beat them. I think it was like a Top Cougars or something like that. Actually, it might exactly be Top Cougars if memory serves me correctly. And now it's this thing of like, what is happening? It's I think of it kind of like, we don't have injuries in esports, but it's almost like tearing your ACL in the NBA, where it's just like, well, you know, super talented roster, nothing you can do about that one. As we get into the waning seconds here, as this game is going to be closed out. Slipping over my words, guys. I prepped for this one. I got a notebook full of notes, so weren't focusing in on the gameplay here too much, but we will in the next game, as this one is not going to find the ground just yet against Gentlemates here. But there it is. Rise with the mid-air fake, falls to the ground. A huge response from Karmine Corp to get on the board here in this semifinal, against Gentlemates Alpine. Rise with a critical goal and 3 saves to his name, trying to will them back into the series. They ultimately lost here to Gentlemates, as we talked about a second ago. But let's hop over to one of the games from the Open Qualifier 6 that Karmine Corp played to finish up the memory lane here, and then talk about some of my big thoughts heading into the World Championship. All right, Open Qualifier 6, a potential closeout Game 6 here against Oxygen Esports. Hey, Joyle's on the other side. We got the full Team Queso roster on the pitch. So they missed that main event, and then here in this Open Qualifier 6 that we're watching, they're, spoiler alert, gonna win this closeout Game 6 against Oxygen, and they're gonna end up getting eliminated in the semifinals by BDS, who looked absolutely red hot in this Open Qualifier 6. They were scoring at will. They were just firing on all cylinders offensively, and Karmine Corp just happened to run into the buzzsaw that was BDS in this event. No shame in that, but given the fact that they missed that main event too, they now are they weren't going to qualify for the major anyways, as I recall it. But it's all about points, right? Because if they any series that they don't win will end up being helpful for Oxygen, who are on their tail trying to qualify for the World Championship. And they did not control their own destiny, which is always a scary place to be, especially for a team of this caliber. So even though they missed out on London, I still think they're one of the most dangerous teams in the world. When I was on the Shiftcast recently, Michael and I were talking about, our top 5 teams heading into the World Championship on who we think might be able to win it. And I had Karmine Corp on my list, despite not making that London major. I just think the talent is undeniable. I think especially Vatira and Rise have a track record on lands. Atow has been great as well, but it's just not as lengthy of a track record as just a gigantic dunk there on Rise on the goal line. Nothing you can do about that. Does this Karmine Corp team view not making the London major as motivation, or did they view it as deflation? I think this is a confidence game in a lot of ways, and if you don't think that you can win it, I think you kind of can, in many cases, manifest your own destiny. If this Karmine Corp comes in thinking, man, we really stunk it up, we're not what we were as Rise, just full go mode is going to put that one away. Maybe we were too good too early and now our best days are behind us. Maybe it was a honeymoon period, maybe that's what they're telling themselves. If so, I don't believe, but I also think that Vatira and Rise are just so high confidence, like they seem unflappable. I really doubt that they're going to come into, the World Championship thinking that they're not the best team here. They probably just look at that not making the main event as just a huge blemish, and it is that. There's really no excuse for a team of that quality missing out on a main event. But that aside, they have still been rock solid for most of the season. And they have the talent to certainly win a world championship. I think they can do it. Do they? I think the early games are going to matter a lot. I think a big confidence building win early on could be a huge boost for this roster. The other thing to consider is incredibly high expectations for this team. Vatira essentially handpicked this. They even handpicked the best coach in the world in many people's eyes in Ferra off of Vitality to build this roster. And if they go the whole season without winning a major, that is a failure. It is what it is, It's kind of like the Clippers picking up Paul George and Kawhi Leonard and giving up all of their draft capital and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, all to only make, only have 3 playoff wins in the 5 seasons they were together. It's no good. This team has high expectations, and that might, inform their nerves if they find themselves in a big situation, especially in the playoffs of the World Championship. But hey, maybe they thrive on that. The other thing to consider is, there's this old adage in the NBA of there's only one ball. And as it translates here, and what on earth was this? Was this Atow? Rise is just going to hand that right over. Atow from an awkward position is going to beat one and then just crunch that one for the double. Can this team find their roles and commit to their roles in order to win? 3 very, very talented players on this team who, like I said, I considered all 3 of them top 5. Is that just too much talent for all 3 to mesh? Do you need someone who is more of a glue guy, more of a role guy, who can kind of forfeit in order for his team to win? Can they mesh together? That's a question that we're still yet to find out. And if they have a poor result at the World Championship and this roster ends up dissolving, is there a chance that Rise is going to be looking for his 5th organization in 3 seasons? These are all questions that I have coming in here. But, Rise has been excellent. He's been top 10 in shots over the course of the season. He is top 10 in collected and stolen boost. He plays very upfield. He's top 10 in midfield and offensive third for the season, as this one's going to find overtime here. Very similar statistically to apparently Jack. And for a couple NBA comps, for anybody trying to wrap their head, around Rise and what he means coming into this World Championship, maybe you're more of an NBA fan who's looking to pick up some more RLCS knowledge. I attribute him as kind of a score-first guard, a Jalen Brunson, a Jamal Murray, a Kyrie Irving-esque player in the way that he is a floor general for his teams. Very, very vocal, especially at lands. He's clutch. He is an incredible finisher, as we might see here. Nope, false alarm. And he is an excellent, ball handler. His dribble, his ability to grab the ball off the ground and make a play where most players would take to the air 9 times out of 10. Rise has more of an appetite for, keeping the ball close and dribbling across, or he can go aerial as well. Those are some players that I have comped out for him. But, he might have a better resume than, Jalen Brunson, who hasn't won anything quite yet. Kyrie Irving, who, won quite a bit early and then has struggled to win since and has kind of moved around with a little bit of turbulence. Obviously not for the same reasons as Rise, but, there are a lot of comparisons in that sense. And then just, the scoring quality and the championship caliber of a Jamal Murray are all things that stand out to me. As Rise is going to catch this one at the midfield. Great first touch. If he would have had a little more boost, it bounced a little heavy for him to get back to. Now he's going to scramble back here, catch a demo, which he's very fortunate that his teammates were able to get that one out. And then here comes Rise, picks up that mid, big dunk to keep that ball in play here. Almost catches Joyo there, or excuse me, Oski going into his own goal line. And Rise all the way back. Vatira is going to pop, fake a second touch. Rise is going to boom and then try and chase as Archie gets a great first touch. Rise is going to let him kind of take that as Atow comes in. All the way back to pick up the boost. This is a very difficult one to read. Understands that he has the time to not have to rush it. Gets a nice little touch there. He's going to go upfield and steal that boost from Archie so that they can't keep solid rotation coming in here. A good idea on that touch, but ends up throwing Atow for a little bit of a loop. But nonetheless, here we come the other way. Big 50 there, as Rise is still one of the few best players in the world who I think almost exclusively rocks the Octane. Going to try and dribble that one out to space. Is going to be a turnover, but that's okay. It looks like both teams are kind of settling in here, looking for the other team to make a mistake. So here's Atow up. He's going to fake it, goes low, and Vatira with the finish. What an incredible team play here from Karmine Corp to get this victory. Rise thinks about trying to go up there and get a bump. Atow is going to call him off. That's something that Karmine Corp do all the time with those midair fakes. Vatira is there to clean it up as Rise is going to go a goal, 2 assists, a part of all of the scoring efforts here for Karmine Corp, who get a big win to close out Oxygen Esports from the Open Qualifier 6. What do you guys think about Karmine Corp and Rise coming into this World Championship? Do you consider them one of the best? Have their poor recent results kind of soured your opinion on them? Where do you find them within the grand scheme of things? I still think that they are one of the few teams that we can truly consider as potential contenders for this World Championship, but I certainly understand the other side of the coin where the results have been a little bit lackluster. Excited to hear what you guys have to say in the comments of this video. Who do you think we should watch next? We've watched a ton of emerging North American talent in the recent videos, and we're going to continue to spotlight players around the RLCS in the upcoming weeks. But as we get closer to that World Championship, I want to make sure we're spotlighting some of the biggest players for that event as well. So definitely let me know in the comments below. We just passed 100,000 lifetime viewers, which again, I am so appreciative for, guys. To each and every one of you who are watching, thank you. It means so much. And thank you for taking the time to watch today's content. And until next time, guys, take it easy.